Welcome and thank you everyone for joining our webinar today titled PTF, Integration to ALM, Scheduling, Production Validation, and Pivot Grid Reporting with Valentin Todorow. As a reminder, all attendees have been placed on mute for the duration of the presentation. If you have any questions, please submit them through the question portal and we will take time at the end of the presentation to answer them. Also, a recording of this webinar will be sent out to you in the next few days following the webinar. Any of our past Elire webinars, as well as a recording of today's webinar, can be found on the Elire Inc. YouTube channel and elire.com. Next slide, please, Valentin. So just a quick background about Elire. We've been in business for 14 years. And we pride ourselves in being trusted advisors to our clients, not only in PTF, which is today's webinar topic, but also in other areas of Oracle Cloud ERP, PeopleSoft Financials and HCM, continuous delivery, and strategic advisory services. We have over 200 clients and are very proud of our work in many different industries with many different company sizes. Before we move to Valentin's introduction, my name is Michael Friend. I'm one of the business development managers that is emceeing today's webinar. I cover the Southeast territory. We have a small group of sales reps, and I'd be able to answer any questions after the fact as well. Valentin, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Thank you, Michael. My name is Valentin Todorow. I'm a managing consultant with Elire. I've been with Elire for 3.5 years. Primarily in focusing on PeopleSoft Test Framework. I have a total of 10 years of PeopleSoft technical and functional experience across financial and HR, and 67 implementations of the PeopleSoft Test Framework. I've been there immediately as soon as the tool was released in Tools 8.5.1, all the way through the latest additions within 8.5.7. I've worked closely with PeopleSoft development. I did actually work for Oracle as well for 7 years prior to working with Elire. During that time, I helped them develop some of the data loader tools and kind of do bug fixes here and there. So I've seen the tool as it's progressed since the inception point of 8.5.1, guided clients through various small and large implementations of PTF, custom designs and builds of the PTF tool, and everything from bolt-on development to recordings.
Excellent. Next slide, please. So the agenda for today's webinar, we'll give a high-level overview of PTF, talk about integrate and schedule and how we can externally trigger and schedule PTF tests, execute multiple concurrent PTF scripts, additional uses and abilities of PTF, the production validation, and PTF reporting methods, as you can see there. But first, we're going to start with a quick poll question, and we'd ask for you to participate here just to give us some insight. Are you currently utilizing PTF? Yes, minimally, no, but you're interested, or no and have no interest, which wouldn't make a ton of sense. Thank you for your participation here. We'll give you just a minute. Give you one more second to submit your response and we'll close this poll. Okay, so as you can see, just about half of you are not using it and the other half are, but just in some capacity. So we'll move forward and hopefully give you some more benefit here with our information.
Okay, so I'll take over from now. So obviously this, and I'm glad that the results show that most people have had some exposure to the tool, are interested in it. Of course, this presentation is a little more in-depth. It's not meant to introduce people to PeopleSoft Test Framework. I'll discuss this in this slide, but I'm glad that there are people that are using it, some minimally, and you know, this hopefully gives you a better insight into the additional things integrations, and of course, how you can actually trigger PeopleSoft Test Framework. And I'll kind of inject some of the services and things that we've done and clients that to help out, and different ways that you can actually use the PeopleSoft Test Framework, not just for testing, but for data loading or inspection of validation components. But I'm glad nobody responded no and not interested, or else why would you be here? So I'm glad that wasn't the case. So I'll start with a quick overview of the PeopleSoft Test Framework. Again, this is just a one slider. If you're not exposed to it or have minimum interaction with it, this will give you just a quick overview. So the tool itself was introduced in Tools 851. I like to call that the beta version of the tool. It had some quirks and issues and didn't have things like message recognition. So it really needed some additional work. It was just out there. And 852, it became a much stabler tool. You're able to play tests, fully integrate them, connect them in shell tests, do whatever you needed to. So, and since then version, and one of my last slides is actually going to be the continued investment of Oracle development within PeopleSoft Test Framework. So I'll kind of highlight some of the things I've done over the generations as it's progressed, but I see more and more clients using it. The interest has peaked. We have more and more implementations and brand new implementations, or people coming back to just add on additional pieces to their PTF services and beef up their libraries. So it's progressed, and it's the internal tool of PeopleSoft development. So they in-house actually have over 60,000 scripts that they actually run before every PUM image. So right before it gets released, they actually run their scripts. They look at the results, they spin up all these environments and run parallel tests to PTF to make sure that these PUM images work, and then they actually release them. So that's their in-house automation testing tool. And of course, the core of the PeopleSoft Test Framework is the functional application testing. So that regression testing, everything from the smoke test, unit test, integration, system test, even some UAT testing can, of course, be done with the PeopleSoft Test Framework. Okay, and of course, intent once we got into the PUM upgrades and no longer doing huge upgrades like from 9.0 to 9.1, you really need an automated tool, especially if you have very aggressive adoption methodology, twice a year. It's very hard to do those cycles of testing in that limited amount of time. Okay, and of course, PeopleSoft Test Framework is capable of doing that. It can increase the number of tests that can be executed, and not only can it increase the number, but you can actually throw a lot of more data sets into a particular component. For example, e-procurement, creating requisitions. Before, maybe you would create 5, 6, 10 happy path requisitions, selecting items from the catalog, some special requests, some things from the favorites, doing some different combos, doing some, budget checking, submitting it, a couple negative tests. That would only equate to about a dozen or so tests for that specific component. Now with PeopleSoft Test Framework, you can actually inject a lot of data sourcing elements. You can loop that component thousands of times if you wanted to. If you wanted to simulate every single requester that's going to hit this component with every single item that could possibly, a combination of items they could select, you can actually do that with PTF. Whereas in manual testing, that was impossible. You just couldn't have the resource allocation to do that kind of testing per component or per business process. Okay. Of course, with that, with automation and everything being tracked at a very granular level, you have the accuracy that comes into play. So once you have these tests built up, they're within your repository, you use them for the actual testing of your application. It's not going to change. You don't have to, the next cycle and the next cycle, you'll test it with the same set of tests. So you have that accuracy that, okay, I'm testing the exact same components, I'm hitting the exact same fields. I know that this thing's going to test exactly the same way. It's a machine. It's a robotic, so it's going to test and hit the components the same way. So the accuracy from testing cycle to testing cycle is there. The control is there. Okay? And of course, the big one, and that's why it's underlined, is the reduction in testing time. Of course, this thing can play, and one of the things they'll show you is how to schedule these and run these in batches. So you can actually reduce the testing time greatly, immensely, especially if you're trying to leverage some of these looping abilities and the ability to do a lot more data sets and transactional elements. You can reduce the testing time greatly with the PeopleSoft Test Framework. You can run them overnight. A lot of my clients, what we'll do is right before we start like a unit testing cycle, we'll just have PTF play over the weekend, and as soon as we get there Monday morning, it's the start of our unit testing. we look at the results of PTF and we can immediately start attacking the things that have failed, start creating tickets with the screenshots it's taken, with the IDs it's generated or not generated, so we can immediately start our testing and retesting and so forth. So it's a huge time reduction element, and it's what you need with our automation tool. And of course, with that, you have a lot of coverage reports and maintenance reports. The big one that I find very helpful is the coverage report. This is actually a vanilla report that comes with a PeopleSoft environment. You'll actually find it in PeopleTools, Lifecycle Tools Test Framework. And what this report does is it actually gives you the gaps. It's a fit gap report of, okay, I have these tests, 100 tests, and I'm glad that some people are using this tool already. I have these tests. I have this new PUM image and change package coming into my system. I've got all these bug fixes and new functionality. Do I actually have coverage for my testing? Do I actually have the PTF scripts that cover this new bug fix or feature or functionality? So that coverage report actually will bridge that gap and tell you, yes, you do have coverage for this people code change, or no, I do not have coverage. So you go record the test, maybe a brand new test because it's a new functionality, rerun this report, and okay, now I actually have coverage. I'm actually covered, and PTF is testing these new things that are coming into my system. So there's a lot of, and they keep adding more and more reports over the last couple of years. I've seen them add all kinds of detail reports, matrix reports, things that just ever more help you with the PeopleSoft Test Framework. Maintenance report, which is another large one, in conjunction with mass updates, can really assist you a lot. Okay, and of course, as you play these scripts, remember, for those that are using it, all of your results, your actual log of what happened, the screenshots themselves, the data, the scripts as well are managed objects. They sit within your database, so you can actually query them. You can build metrics, and one of the things I'll show you later in the presentation is how I've actually leveraged the reports and built reports from those tables, built pivot grids, composite queries. Whatever way you want to extract your results, there's a way to do it within PeopleSoft, especially with Pivot Grid, Simple Analytics. Okay. And the last thing I'll mention is for those that have not had a lot of exposure into PeopleSoft Test Framework, the method that you do record a new script, it does have its own little recording wizard like UPK or other testing tools out there, so you don't have to know every single element on that page. Press the record button. It will bring up the browser, so your PL sign-on page. You'll press the record, and it'll actually start capturing as you're going through the pages, signing in, clicking buttons, adding new records in the component search page, processing that page, manipulating grids or score regions, uploading files, downloading files. It's able to not only capture everything, but of course simulate that back on the playback. You do have the ability, of course, to code your own logic, add in variables, conditional statements, loops, data array sources, so that you can really beef that thing up. So when it comes to the next cycle of playback, it's capable of running and working okay. And I already mentioned that it's part of the PeopleSoft stack. It actually comes with your PeopleSoft license. There's no additional licenses for the PeopleSoft Test Framework. It's just sitting in PS Home setup. You'll actually find the executable for your PTF client. We can guide, and we usually guide our clients through, okay, how you set this up, what's the correct environment to set this up in, what kind of archiving strategy, execution strategy. We encompass all of that, including workshop training sessions. So, but the client itself, of course, communicates just through the integration broker. You don't even need to install the rest of the PeopleTools on the workstation that your PTF client is installed on. It stands completely alone, which gives it a lot of benefit, especially if you're trying to run this on virtual machines that are spun up from a server somewhere. Okay? And again, everything, and this is the great thing, is you can have one client, maybe 12 people are using the same PTF client, all running the exact same test. It will just log a different ID and a user and timestamp each of those executions. So nothing's actually stored on those workstations. Everything is as secure as the rest of your data within the database layer. Okay. So again, a very quick overview of the PeopleSoft Test Framework. I did have this quick video kind of showing the speed. It's a video I made a couple of years ago, so you can kind of notice that it's still the classic navigation. It kind of shows you the speed. It's a little pixelated, but you can kind of see it goes, and again, this is recorded as a playback, goes through the page much quicker. Even the navigation piece is a lot quicker because you actually directly jump to a component. Now, Now with Fluid, you have tiles, you have the nav bar, and some have a hybrid where they still have even the classic breadcrumb navigation. You can actually, we figured out methods and templates that can help any client with whatever way they want to test their components. Do you want to directly go to that component, or do you want to actually try the navbar navigation? Do you want to try the tiles to make sure everything works okay, your work centers work okay? So we've done a lot of work with the templates to make sure everything's standardized and works with no matter what page you're hitting. Are you hitting a classic page on a Fluid wrapper, or are you hitting a Fluid page on a Fluid wrapper? So it works in any way. So here it actually finished. So you have the PTF automating testing was able to create the requisition. It was able to approve the requisition, and it was able to create the purchase order within 1 minute. Whereas with manual testing, it takes a minute just to even fill out the items on that requisition line. Okay, so much faster. Of course, PTF, you can link the tests together so you can have that end-to-end process. The IDs can also get passed from one test to another. So once you're done with that create requisition component, the requisition ID is, of course, generated on the confirmation page. You extract that requisition ID, feed it into, and you log in as an approver. So you can have, of course, different people logging into each one of the components. You log in as an approver. You use that variable, which is your new requisition ID. That's, of course, created off a sequence. You look it up, approve it, and then you, of course, create the purchase order directly from that requisition if that's the business process you're testing. Of course, then a PO ID is generated, and you move forward through that test into AEP, so in receiving. Okay, so a quick video of that. So we'll jump into why everybody's hopefully here, which is some of the advanced topics of the PeopleSoft Test Framework. And these are not things that you find in people blogs. They're things that we have just developed for our clients over the years, just out of need, because like this example, a lot of our clients use some kind of test management or lifecycle management software like the HP Quality Center, okay, ALM, and they want to actually run their PTF tests from there. They have a lot of business analysts that they don't want to train in the PeopleSoft Test Framework. That's a whole different department that does QA and automation. So they want to give that ability to people that are not necessarily technical, whereas, of course, developing a PTF script, it can be technical at times, especially if you want to do a lot of the advanced things that it's capable of doing. So the integration that we've done, and we've done it several times, is with the HP Quality Center, and it works flawlessly. We're very happy with this integration. And the way it works, and there is no API with PTF, but there is the ability to actually trigger PTF tests from command line, okay? And you literally just call this command, the browser will open, start playing through your test. As soon as it's done executing the test, the browser will close and then echo back a result to the program that's controlling it. So the way we do this with the ALM tool is we just create a new test. We select the VAPI XP test type. It's just a type if you're familiar with the ALM tool. And just a type of test you select. It kind of pre-builds a script for you, which is fantastic. But of course, we take it a little further. We kind of customize it to our own needs. And customization, not PeopleSoft customization, I know it's a no word, but within the actual ALM script, we customize it because we want to do a lot more with it. We invoke some of the X tools run commands, and then we actually feed it this string. So of course, there's a CD to the path where the executable is living, and then we actually kind of dictate, okay, we're going to connect to this environment with this user. So CO and CP are user and password. This is the test I want to run, which is AP voucher build. The test case, is the data combination, which environment I want to run it in. Of course, PTF is scalable in that you can have it configured in like a dev environment or a test environment, but you can actually point the execution or the playback to any other environment, okay, to a UAT environment, to a test 2 environment. Maybe you want to point back to a dev environment. So you can actually dictate just through this little small parameter string exactly where you want to point. Okay, so this will actually take care of the execution, so the test will run. You will literally just press the play button on the ALM tool. Once it's done playing, the PTF will send the response back to ALM saying, okay, this thing actually aired out, or this test went to success, and then you move on to the next test and the next test. So it's just a way to execute PTF scripts without ever knowing the PTF is running. It doesn't even open up the PTF client or have you log in. Everything is done through the ALM tool, and you can actually configure it to as much as you want. I think you can even have prompts on the ALM tool that can feed some of these user and passwords if you have, of course, security considerations. So there's a lot that you can kind of configure and customize with how you actually execute these tests from a third party. And I know Jira, I think, is the other testing software. Literally any test management software that you can run a command line, or usually there's even add-ons you can add to a test management software. You can actually trigger a PTF test and run it. And of course, you can run it for any PTF test. That includes unit tests or end-to-end tests for any test case and against any environment. Okay, so you have kind of full control via that method. And again, it's not a true API like out of the box, but it is a very good way to run your tests after they're, of course, built, ready to go and kind of set for that environment. You can quickly trigger them. And of course, you don't even have to use some of the reporting tools from PeopleSoft. Everything is actually tracked on your third-party test management software. Okay, and this actual snippet is from the People books. You can actually find it, but if you need additional help in setting this up, we can definitely provide some services for that. Okay, so going along the same lines of executing scripts from the command line, you can actually schedule these. So one of the features, and we found this to be the most useful, is just using the Windows task schedule. Every single Windows machine that you might be using has a task scheduler. You just go down to the search bar, hit task scheduler, and boom, you actually can create a task, name it something, give it a time or a recurrence, or you want to run it overnight or on the weekend, set it a time, give it an action, kind of a trigger, maybe set some conditions of, this should run if the user is not logged in, or it's certain, there's a lot of customizations you can do. Then you give it where your PTF is installed, give it the same arguments. So those arguments that kind of dictate, the user, the test you want to run, press save, and all that time, your test will trigger. Now, there's a lot of other considerations. Are we running this on a virtual machine? Is the virtual machine turned on to have administrative privileges? So we can help with a lot of those and trying to figure that out, because we've already gone through it once. But it's a really easy way to schedule PTF tests, run them, come in Monday morning and look at the results and see exactly what happened. Again, one of the other topics is, all right, I have 3,000 PTF tests. We've spent all this time building these tests. How can running them takes a long time. I mean, this is actually simulating a user touching the pages, clicking the process button. Sometimes that could take 20, 30 minutes, depending on what kind of process you're running. These tests can actually take a long time. The bigger your repository is of PTF tests, the more loops you have within a component. It takes longer and longer, hours upon hours, sometimes days of executions. Now, those days are usually like weeks of manual testing is now hours or a day, but that's still a very long time to execute. How can I actually break that apart, spin up a couple of environments, and then run these in parallel? There is a way to do that. As long as the tests are not in a series where you're testing a full end-to-end process, you can actually break these apart, the smaller chunks, and then execute them on multiple VMs. And virtual machines are my favorite way of doing this. And this is the way that Oracle PeopleSoft development do their testing. They spin up a bunch of VMs and they run all of their batches in parallel, because there's, PeopleSoft vanilla with every single component, both on the HR finance side, that's a lot. So they have to run in parallel. And one easy way that I've found to do this is you have a host machine, a shared folder that is native to all of your controller VMs. And that shared folder actually has a bunch of batch files where you dictate what needs to be run on each one of those controlled machines. And you can have 3 or 3,000. It doesn't matter how many machines you have. It's all based on hardware abilities or the management software, your virtual management software master. But you can actually create little batch files, again, using the same method. Execute give it the executable home. You might have to CD to it, so this might not be the full. Give it what test you want to run and what environment. So this is actually an example of 3 different tests that are run, one in dev, one in test, and another one in dev. Okay, and because the shared folder is controlling these all have a service operation on startup, and they'll immediately trigger the batch file based on their shared folder. So it's a very simple, easy way from a controlled master to spin up a bunch of machines. You just allocate a Windows machine, a very, very bare machine that just has PTF installed and like a Chrome or Firefox, and I'll start up a service operation that triggers a batch file from a shared directory, and it will spawn and execute in as many parallel. And of course, all the results are stored in the PeopleSoft database, so that's one central location where you can do your reporting. So that's parallel execution, simplified, but works. Okay, so start with poll question number 2.
Excellent. Thank you, Valentin. So next question, for those of you using PTF, are you having problems running large or long PTF scripts during cycles of testing? See a few different options there for answers. No, everything runs smoothly. Yes, a few scripts crash or timeout. Yes, too many scripts to run in series. And yes, can't run in Chrome or Firefox. IE is too slow. Preach there. So I'll give you just a few minutes, few seconds here to respond if you wouldn't mind. We'll come right back. Give you all just one more second to respond if you don't mind, for those using PTF. Okay. So now you can see the results here. A little bit of mix between both. Valentin, if you want to address that, and we can.
It's pretty common, and definitely there's a lot of things to consider when Chrome and Firefox. There's these web drivers that sit in between the PTF tool and the browsers, and they have to be a specific version based on the version of Chrome and Firefox. IE is definitely very slow. Once they re-architected the ability to do multiple browsers in 8.5.5, it really slowed down IE, and I've tried to actually dissect it and decompile some of the DLL files that control IE, but it's far too vast to fix why IE is so slow. And it seems to be Selenium and other testing tools that are also having the same problem with IE. But Chrome and Firefox are my preferred method, so there's definitely a lot of fixes, and we guide clients through that based on the tools version they're on. And it's good. Some things running smoothly, 5 out of 9, that's fantastic. That's great to hear. And a few scripts crash or time out, of course. Yeah, that will happen. There's a lot of optimization we do. We've gone through in a lot of clients that already have the repository of PTF scripts, and we do kind of an optimization of their PTF, make sure they're using the best methodology, that they have well-recorded scripts. First and foremost, they have good data staging, because that's a consideration that people don't think of is, okay, we've recorded this, we've gone through this project of recording and building our scripts. What do we do now to play these back? How do we stage the data? How do we interpret or even get results out of here? So this is definitely something we can help with, but I'm glad stuff is running smoothly for some people. That's fantastic. All right, so I'll move on. So one of the things that I love to cover is the additional uses and abilities of PeopleSoft Test Framework. So one of the things is, and this kind of goes back to what I was talking about, being able to test the component fully, being able to not only hit, create requisition a couple of happy times and a couple of negative tests, but being able to test thousands of data combinations, thousands of accounts, combo codes, or different items, different combinations of items, special requests for different categories, for different vendors. That kind of transactional data testing was not possible with manual testing. It would take too long. There's too much data out there, too many combinations to be able to test all of that. But with PTF, you can actually feed the data via the database itself using the data loader tool that I built, or you can actually use Excel to load data. And this can be done for testing, or if you actually want to load data to a conversion environment. Maybe you're consuming another entity and you have their database, but Excel to CI would take so long. You actually want to use, and you don't have the maybe technical resources or doing something else, and they just don't have time. You only have your functional resources. They don't know how to load Excel to CIs. They don't know how to do file layout. So you can actually use PTF tests, and even using the tests that you already have to load data into like a conversion environment or some kind of upgrade or environment. And what you do is you have your data in Excel, you feed it into your PTF test as if you're trying to stage mocking data, but this could be actual live data. A PTF will actually load the data via the pages themselves using the page validation that already exists there, and it'll go from record to record, just loading data over and over and over again. Again, it's not, maybe not as fast as Excel to CI, but this will have all the validation right there. And if something were to go wrong, maybe somebody in that Excel file messed something up, there's not the right prefix in the C30 field, it's going to catch that, PTF will screenshot that, and it'll catch that something went wrong. Okay, so this little video is actually showing how it's actually creating items over and over and over again. So if you wanted to create a couple thousand items, you have those items in an Excel because they were extracted from a third-party system. You can quickly feed them into already existing PTF tests, which maybe are testing items, and boom, it's actually going to start entering items into your system for you using the pages themselves. Okay, and as each item gets created, it moves on to the next item and the next item from that Excel file. Okay. Another ability of the PeopleSoft Test Framework, and this came about in 8.5.5, I think it was 8.5 or 8.5.6, is the form factor testing. Of course, one of the big reasons why we have Fluid is the responsive theme. There's actually meta tags in the CSS that actually, based on the screen resolution, will compress or expand the page, the PeopleSoft Fluid page, based on that resolution. So you want to be able to test for that. And this is funny because this is actually a vanilla page, it's the special request page. This vanilla page actually is not correct. You see the heading has these little dots. Price is indented. So it actually structurally might work okay and might be able to process correctly, but visually it's incorrect. And the PTF can actually test for that. It can actually emulate different size screens within PeopleSoft, within just your browser, because browsers have the ability to emulate screen sizes, and it'll actually set it to that smartphone or tablet size. If you're somebody who is moving in that direction, it'll actually start testing your Fluid screen for that. And of course, PTF is a regression testing tool, but you can actually extract properties like, is the title correctly? Is the width correct? Is the color correct? If branding is very important to you, maybe you need this to be the gray hex this exact, and if it's not that, fail my test. So you can do not only transactional testing and making sure that the page is processed correctly, but stylistic testing as well of your pages, okay, on different size screens, okay, so on different browsers too. So just the scope increases more and more and more of what you can do with this tool. So you can test this on 3 different browsers, 4 different browsers with different size screens. So the number of permutations that can happen just increases exponentially. Okay, so form factor testing. One of my favorite methods, and actually I was a proponent of this back in Tools 8.5.2 and 8.5.3, and I brought this to the attention of Oracle development, that I needed a tool so that I could load data, like I could just query something from the database. Maybe I needed to query a couple of pending vouchers or something so that I could test approvals. So I got this idea to them, we started working on it, and we developed the data loader tool. And this data loader tool, what it's going to do is, this is actually an old video, but it will actually runs a query by integration broker service. It extracts that query results, whatever column you're trying to extract, into an array, and then you can actually loop over that array X amount of times. So example, if you're trying to test every catalog in your system, you want to log in and create an item to making sure that every category works, at least the active ones, you can actually do that. It runs a query within seconds, extracts it, starts your PTF test, and starts running through the page, inputting suppliers, inputting different categories, making sure that everything works okay. And the way the PTF works, even if one fails, it doesn't kill your testing. It continues on with the next one. It's going to note that one failed. It's going to red flag that line, screenshots the screen automatically on error, and then moves on to the next one. Okay, so this tool that I helped them develop, data loader, is very good. You can have multiple data loader sources injected in there. We even have, as part of our services, pluggable data sources. So if you need to have kind of quick, all right, I need to know what the current open period, because this test depends on it, you just grab from the examples folder some of these pre-built plugins, you inject it right into your test, and that test is good to go. You never have to stage data for it. You have some kind of approval test where you need, a pending voucher each time, and it's not part of an end-to-end. So boom, you just grab this pluggable data source and you throw it into your test. and that test is good to go. So a lot can be done if you can source data right from the database itself or from neighboring databases, because you can actually log into different environments during the same execution. Maybe you have something in dev, you want to extract some data from dev, open test up and now test it with that. You mix and match in any variety, but being able to extract the data from database and then use it right in any test is very, very powerful. Okay, hand raising, not sure what that means. Okay. Of course, along those lines, and I kind of touched on, you can actually go from one environment to another. And that's where we've had one client that actually wants to use PTF to validate configuration or validate data from one environment to another. And this is where PTF also is very capable of doing. So what it can do, and this is part of the shell test, there's a command in there called execution option. You can actually, during the same session, as long as you have the environments correctly filled out in the execution options, you can actually go from one environment to another, either extracting data from one environment and then populating it in a second environment, or just extracting data from like a dev environment, going to test and making sure that everything's configured correctly in test, making sure that, you know, items are there or sequences are correct, or anything can be done from one environment to another. Okay, either data transfer, validation, you name it, it's capable of doing that. Okay. Along those lines, that kind of brings us to the production validation and inspection. Okay, so the production validation, one thing, I had a client that has a lot of incoming accounts receivable interfaces, and one thing that happens a lot for them is somebody will incorrectly do a prefix or a value that's out of bounds, and it'll actually make their processes crash. And no matter what they built into these programs, it takes too long to process. So they needed kind of an external tool, and this, of course, isn't external, to actually inspect data in their staging tables. And I was like, hey, let's use PTF to do that. I was like, oh, it's possible doing that, yes. So this actually doesn't even bring up a browser. It doesn't actually simulate anything. All it does is it runs it within its own shell, a PTF script that actually parses rows of tables, and can either compute or, you know, verifies that prefixes, suffixes are there, that IDs and items are in specific ranges of data. So you can do literally, there is no limit. There's a full capability of arithmetic within PTF. So you can do calculations on there. This row and this row from this table should equal this and this in this table, then everything's okay. And as soon as it finds an error, maybe this should not be 20, it's out of bounds, it should minimum be 21. This will make my entire program fail and my import to crash. So PTF can almost do like an inspection of production tables. And this, of course, will be a completely different subset from your PTF testing installation. This would be its own siloed use of PTF in a very specific environment by very well-trained people in the PeopleSoft space. But it's just to show you that you can actually do a lot more with this tool than just testing. Form factor testing, stylistic testing, inspection of data in staging tables. I mean, the sky's the limit with what you can do because of the way it can simulate and connect to PeopleSoft. Okay, this is actually on the inspection piece, and I kind of talked about it a little bit, the ability to actually do some computing from different tables. So maybe, and this is the example here, no browser is needed. So this won't even spawn a browser. It's actually doing this via the data loader tool itself. So data loader tool, you just specify the query and the parameters. It extracts an array, and then you build loops or nested loops. And within each layer of the loop, it can do different things. Example, at the top layer, maybe you want to extract IDs and a county. Based on that, it's going to start a sub loop within that. Within that, do another 2 sources. Okay, hit 2 additional queries, extract, you know, maybe some tax rates, various other parameters. Do a computation, so you can do, you know, arithmetic, very complex arithmetic, simple arithmetic, concatenations, whatever you need to maybe do y plus v times the tax rate of that specific county because you've extracted the z out of an additional query. Compute that, give me the summation of that, and then, excuse me, and then actually run this against an even additional query and make sure that the sums equal what they're supposed to in a third query. So you can do a cross-table validation with data. So you can actually start getting very granular with the way you inspect data, making sure that everything, this is almost like you're auditing your tables before maybe a process runs, or just by virtue of needing auditing at this granular level, something that would take hours and hours for an analyst to do, or many Excels and all kinds of computations. You can just run PTF scripts to just parse this data continuously if you needed to, and find errors for you, immediately notify you that something went wrong, gives you that string of data and what row it was on each table, and can tell you that something went wrong. Okay, so that actually closes out the additional uses. So we've covered, form factor testing. You can actually load from an Excel file, the data loader tool, and this ability to inspect between environments, or just like production inspection of data before any kind of processing occurs within an environment. Okay, and I'll shoot it over to poll question number 3.
Yeah, thanks, Valentin. So our last poll question of the day is, are you using PeopleSoft reporting tools like Pivot Grid or queries to report on PTF test cycles? Your options are no, only PTF log viewer, yes, simple queries, yes, pivot grids, or yes, XML outputs. Give everyone a few seconds, and we'll close this out with the results. Give you one more second to input your answer, and we'll close this poll.
This is exactly what I was expecting, actually. Yeah. So the majority of you guys are just using the log viewer, which is great. The problem I've come into is, especially when you start looping a component hundreds and thousands of times, if you need to do that many combinations, it becomes very, very difficult to start to inspect that log. It starts to hit the 9,000 or so lines within the log, and there's no way to actually go from the top-down view and inspect individual clusters of sets. So it's very common that I find a lot of my clients, especially when I come back and I'm helping others out, that they're in this situation, or using simple queries. So what we're going to show you is the way that I've kind of evolved the PTF tool, and where I've taken a lot of my clients, and it's 2 different directions. Sometimes at the same time, either using XML. So this is something that gets generated if you've configured it correctly in your execution options. This will actually generate an XML file on the workstation that PTF is running, or if it's targeted to a shared drive, it'll put these XML documents in the shared drive. And what we do is we have our Elire built templates. They're in different factors. This is kind of one of the basic ones, where actually you open the XML up, you'll open it up in the browser, and it becomes this nice printable report at the top telling you exactly what environment, what module you're running in, what test you just ran, the data combination, the overall result. Okay, this could be an end-to-end test or a unit test. Did this actually work? Yes, it did. How many subtests, if this was part of a larger whole, who executed it, and how long it took. So it gives you kind of a synopsis at the top, and then at the bottom, it'll actually tell you the IDs, the amounts, and any screenshots that happened during that test, be them specifically injected, purposefully injected screenshots, or error message screenshots that happened during execution of a failed test. Okay, so these are XMLs, and each test you run, or end-to-end test you run, will create one of these XML documents. And as long as you have the XSL, which is just a style sheet that gets superimposed on this XML, you can actually open these reports up. You can print them. You can print them to PDF if you wanted to. But it's a nice way if you wanted to just, run all your tests, grab all these, print them all to PDF, zip them up, and boom, there's your unit test for pump 29 implementation, cycle 2. Now you have an audit trail that, yes, we did test everything. Here's the report printed out in PDF with all the screenshots in that repository. So yes, we did test everything. With PTF, there are the results. Okay, that's kind of the granular results you can extract. The other method, and of course, I already mentioned, you can build queries, you can build composite queries, is being able to use the pivot grid functionality. So if you're not familiar, it's actually been around for a long time, but it's actually gotten a lot better over the last couple of years, are the simple analytics that come pre-built with PeopleSoft, the pivot gridding ability. Okay, and this is really useful because it has that drill down ability. You can, especially we do have a lot of composite queries that feed these pivot grids, so you can actually from the top view, and I have a screenshot in a second of everything that was tested by module counts. Failed for AP, you blow that up. You drill down into it. Okay, within this AP failed, these users, simulated users, tested this. These are the log IDs. Okay, I want to drill down into this one. This is a critical, pay cycle on. You blow that one up even further. Okay, what happened during these tests? Which logs actually failed? Show me those, and let's start creating tickets for those and fixing them. Okay, so I'll show you quickly what those, of course, I saw a few already had used. Simple query results. So there's 5 tables that are dedicated. So you can do some simple queries, give me a list of all the tests, when they were run, if they passed or failed, or what happened, this error synchronizing the browser. Okay, the browser didn't even start during that test. So let's rerun it, see if it works okay. So you can very quickly create some simple queries. But of course, what you want to get to is this level of view. And this is kind of my favorite. And a lot of stakeholders also like this view because it's graphical. It gives them that high level visibility. And we tailor this based on the client. Okay, give me all the results. Okay, what's passed, what's failed by module, counts, and the ability to drill down, like I just mentioned, being able to inspect workforce admin, drill down into the failed ones, immediately inspect what happened, who ran them, start creating tickets. So if you have thousands of executions of PTF, this is the way to go. It's very hard to just interpret the PTF log, especially when you're batching these things up, running them over the weekend. It executes 100 or 1,000 PTF scripts. It takes you more time to just go through that log than just to play them manually. So this is just the evolution of PTF. You have to use some kind of analytics tool, and why not use the tools that are already built into PeopleSoft themselves to give you that view of what happened during your testing. So this is my favorite. And of course, you can do all kinds of filters to it. You can do tolerances. You can print these out. You can even have personalized views of this. So the pivot grids are personalizable. You have one person that only cares about benefits. They'll filter it based on their criteria, and then actually they can save it as their personalized view of this pivot grid. So each time they come into the pivot grid, that's the view they see. They don't care about employee self-service or payroll. That's maybe their manager wants to see this view, but they just care about their benefits area. So it's personalizable and very, very powerful. Okay. And of course, the XML, like I mentioned, this is a report. This is actually a much larger view. We have our own styled sheets so that based on what you need out of it, you need a sign off on this thing. You need every line listed on here, or just kind of the cliff notes, what ID, what amount, and the screenshot. Boom, this was tested, and we're good to go. So it's a very neat and clean way to do reporting and results. Okay. And of course, kind of a recap, the extendability. I mean, this tool is very extendable. You can really, I don't want to say customize because it's a bad word nowadays, but you can really tailor this to whatever kind of testing and the granularity of your testing that you're looking for. You can integrate it with any management software. You can even integrate this with, if you're just trying to run this off batch files, you can do that as well, or other testing tools. If you have a lot of third-party stuff that's running from like Selenium IDE or something, you can, from one testing tool, trigger the PTF testing tool. So, and then go back to your other system, maybe a Tele or anything. So very extendable. Reporting, you can do reporting. Of course, these are old pagelets I used to build and reports. Now, of course, we have the pivot grids, but you can do simple queries all the way to pivot grids and pagelets. You can schedule PTF just using Windows Scheduler. Very easy. Of course, we've built a lot of Bootstrap portals and plugins for PeopleSoft. So several clients wanted, can we just have a portal page where we can control the data and the execution? And we built just simple bolt-on pages where they can open their tests up, stage some data for those tests, press play. On that bolt-on page, which actually triggers a virtual machine execution very similarly through that command line execution. So they never even have to see PTF running. They just press play via methods, and we can help you implement this. It can actually spin up a virtual machine or access an already running virtual machine on the server, play that test, and their bolt-on page refreshes, giving them exactly what happened. Okay, and of course, a lot of the methods, we have very scalable methods so that we can reduce the number of tests that are in your system. So PTF tests, but each one of these tests is very well refined. So you don't have to create a requisition test for, from the catalog, from special rec. It's one specific PTF test that actually does a lot, and we segment these tests into different features and functions so that you have a smaller and smaller PTF script repository instead of just a blown up one. And the last slide before we get into questions, I only have a couple minutes left, is I wanted to kind of guide you through the continued investment of PTF from Oracle's perspective. And like I mentioned, they started in 851, so that was 2010. So 9 years of maturity with this product. And each one of the versions, they've introduced something new. 854, the mass update tool. So now when you go through PUM images, if there are retrofits and changes, you invoke this mass update tool, which is within the PTF tool itself, and you can actually do quick find and replace of many objects on the page, and boom, it's changed every occurrence of that field and every test that you have. So a much easier way to retrofit your tests, the ability to build app designer projects right from PTF. So it's very, very flexible. In 855, the ability to do the multiple browsers, and actually toggling windows. So you can actually tag the different windows you have open. Maybe you have like 3 different components open on 3 different windows. You can actually tell PTF, okay, go to this component, create an entry. Go to the other open window, now process that entry. So you can actually be doing multiple things as one user at the same time. So you can tag and switch windows. The live data, so in 856, that data loader tool came about. In 857, the ability to actually give roles to specific folders. So if you're a company that needs to segment its data and AP can only have access to AP folders, in 857 you can actually do that. And new and improved web drivers as well in 856. So they keep, because they use it in-house, they need to keep evolving this tool and making it better and better and better. So they'll continue investing and using this tool for the foreseeable future. Great tool so far. Okay, so I'll open up. I only have a couple, but I want to definitely address some questions you guys might have.
Thanks, Valentin. Our first question, Casey is wondering, how hard is it to edit PTF scripts if changes occur in our system via PUM updates or retrofits?
It's actually very easy. If it's something like a new field is added, all you have to do is open that test up to that specific line, press the recording tool, and record that field. And it's going to just inject it into your test, and you're good to go. If Perfect. It's something like where fields have changed, then you actually run what's called the test maintenance report. That test and maintenance report will tell you exactly what's happened based on a snapshot of the the incoming change project. And it'll give you a comparison between the legacy environment, the new change package, and it's going to actually line up and tell you exactly what's changed, which fields have changed. And then you use that mass update tool that I just mentioned. With that mass update tool, you can actually feed it that report, and it's actually going to go through all of your tests, and every occurrence of a change, it's going to fix your tests and get them ready for the next PUM image. Okay.
Thank you for that. So we have a couple questions that are on the same thread, basically asking, are the analysis tools built by Elire or those delivered tools that they can rely on for generating reports? Could you talk a little bit about what we've built?
Yeah. So the test maintenance report and the test coverage reports are built by Oracle. So if you go to PeopleTools, Lifecycle Tools Test Framework, you'll actually see all the reports in there. What we build are a lot of the templates, a lot of the plugins, the scripts themselves, of course. We can help you design well thought out scripts and strategy. But a lot of those reports are from the maintenance and coverage report are part of PeopleSoft Vanilla.
Okay, thank you for that. I think one more question that we have before we wrap here from Christine. Do most of your client scripts, quote unquote, wait for processes/jobs to complete, i.e. go to success before executing subsequent scripts? The concern is the length of time required to finish running integration.
Yeah, so when you invoke the run process command, you can actually do a wait equals true and expected equals success. And then what PTF is going to do is once it's in the run control page, it runs a process, it grabs a process instance, goes into process monitor, searches by that process instance, and every 5 seconds is going to click the refresh button. Well, I think the timeout in the local options is like to about 60 minutes. And yeah, sometimes they can take a lot longer. Now, if it's a end-to-end test and this process is the next process in the chain is dependent on this, then yeah, you have to wait. Now, if it's not, if it's fully independent, what you can do is you can kind of turn off that wait equals true and expected equals success, and it will go and run that process from that run control, move on to the next test, and then you just circle back to process monitor, search by that process instance, and then check the status every 20, 30 minutes within the full cycle of testing. So there's ways to turn wait equals true, yes and no, and then circle back to tests within a cycle.
Perfect. So that wraps up our Q&A. If you want to go to the next slide, please. If for all of those attendees, if you do have any questions, or for those listening from a recording, please reach out to Valentin or myself for additional follow-up questions, and we'd be happy to help you there. Also, we'd appreciate that you engage with Elire on our social media platforms, as you can see there to the right, at Elire Inc. And just a reminder, a recording of this presentation, as well as a link to register for our next webinar, will be sent out in the next few days. Thank you again for attending, and I hope you all have a great rest of your day.